So how did I get to Berklee? Well, I'm playing salsa gigs in New York City, playing timbales. I'm playing a few little fun things in high school, things like just local guys my own age. And at that time, you could get gigs at bars or whatever. So I'm getting a little experience. And then a guy I went to grammar school with, I went to a school for gifted kids from the sixth to the eighth grade called Monsignor William R. Kelly. I went to Catholic school, many Puerto Rican families and Black families. They wanted to have their kids raised in with a Catholic education. And you had to pay for that. Public school was free, but Catholic school, you had to pay. And these working class families would do it, man, or whatever. And of course, you'd play the numbers, what people call lotto today. My Uncle Ray was a numbers runner. And I'm 12 years old and I'm collecting for him. He's taking me in a car and we go to a bodega or someplace. Go in there, tell him you're Ray, I'm here for Ray, and they're gonna give you a paper bag. I go, what's inside the paper bag? I go, don't worry about it, just go get it. So after the end of the day, he'd give me $25, which was a lot of money for a little kid. And my mother found out how, because I bought some sneakers, some Converse sneakers, which used to be called in the hood limousines for the feet at that time. So where'd you get the sneakers in Spanish? Like I said, everything sounds more dramatic in Spanish or Italian or French. Where'd you get the sneakers? I go, Uncle Ray lent me the money. Uncle Ray, huh? This, that, and the other. So then she starts looking through my stuff. I had a little shoebox and money was in there, Where'd you get this money? Ray, right? This. So we lived on the 12th floor. He lived on the 10th floor. And his three daughters, Daisy, Vaughn, and Haiti, were my cousins. So we used to hang out a lot and everything. But anyway, she goes down there. She knocks on the door and she starts screaming at the top of her lungs. And you could hear the whole damn thing in the project, in that building.
Of course.
And he goes, oye, pero Juanita, por favor, please, like that. She starts screaming, what are you doing to your nephew? How dare you? This, that, and the other. And my Uncle Ray was a local hero because he was a Golden Gloves boxing champion. So he was a good boxer. He was a hipster before that term came about. But anyway, it was hilarious. That ended my career as a numbers runner. I did it for a couple of weeks until my mother found out. But that was just part of growing up in the hood, man. And I saw the beautiful side of it was all this stuff that I talked about, music from the musical standpoint. And I was the beneficiary of it because I'm being bombarded by all this music. And I just loved it all. And like everybody else in the neighborhood loved it all. I mean, I remember when Herbie Hancock's Chameleon came out. The whole place was rocking. People be playing basketball and guys with boom boxes playing that, or they'd play Azúcar Pa' Ti by Eddie Palmieri while the brothers and the Latinos we're all playing basketball together, the whites, etc. We were all united by the music. What an incredible, great environment to grow up in. And the parallel universes are New Orleans, Havana, Cuba, Santiago, etc. I'm sure there's similar scenes in Montreal, Quebec, things like, in the certain neighborhoods where you go to a neighborhood and all of a sudden you see a group of guys playing like it's Django Reinhardt's group and they're singing in French or whatever. So I was the beneficiary of all that. So by the time I got to high school, I had some skills and multiple percussion and basic skills on drum set. But this kid that I went to that school for gifted kids, I went to Immaculate Conception from the 1st to the 5th grade. And then they said to us, there's the people that had the highest grades in class were allowed to take this test to go to this experimental Catholic school that was run by Jesuit brothers who are very historically progressive. And if you went to that school, you didn't have to pay tuition.
Wow.
But I was not offered to take the test, even though my grades were in the top percentile. Only the white kids in the school were offered to take the test. My mother found out
Oh,
and she went ballistic, man. We have a thing called bochinche in Spanish. Bochinche is gossip. And she found out through gossip that they were offering this test to the kids with the highest grades. And she's going, how come Bobby doesn't have Roberto hasn't been offered the test? She went into the principal's office. I didn't see it, but people told me about it, that she started yelling at the guy in her broken English, why you not giving my son test? Why? Because he's Puerto Rican, right? Right? You know. So
yes.
they let me take the test, and I did the interview, and I was the only one they accepted.
Wow.
Yeah, those were the kind of racist things
Sure. Oh yeah,
that
yeah.
we went through. So that was great because now I had to go to school every day, taking the subway from the 6th to the 8th grade. During that time period, when the city was bankrupt, junkies ruled the earth in New York, and you had to always be looking over your back. I became very independent very fast. I learned very, very fast, very fast to be self-sufficient, independent. It was good for me. It was scary at first, but after a while, I got into a groove, and it was just, hey man, I'm riding the subway, man.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so every day to go to school. So in that school, I met this guy, David Carmona. He was a music enthusiast like me, and he played a little trumpet. He lived right near the Manhattan School of Music, and we used to get together to listen to music. And we're listening to everything, man. We're listening to Osibisa from London. We're listening to Eric Clapton. We're listening to Jeff Beck. We're listening to Weather Report. We're listening to Eddie Palmieri. And, I remember when we were listening to Eddie Palmieri, I go, how's he doing that on the piano, man? He's got that sound and nobody else. And we're trying to figure out what it is. And finally, we figured out that he was doing fourths on the piano. But two kids, like trying to figure out what somebody's doing, like
Right.
just tinkling away. Let's try this, let's try that. And then all of a sudden, boom, we go, oh man, that's what it is. Hey, play a fourth above that, boom, boom. It's like, those are the kind of great Rubicon experiences that I had. So anyway, with David, we went to the same high school, Cardinal Hayes in the South Bronx. And the only reason I picked that school was because I could walk to it from where I lived. So we formed a band, and we call it Orquesta Suprema. And what we did was, in our own primitive way, we wrote charts, and we were doing copies of like Eddie Palmieri songs, typical classic Cuban boleros, or boleros that were maybe composed by people that were not Cuban, but they're done. The boleros are Cuban, really, like things like Perfidia, Bésame Mucho, etc. And we're imitating also Santana, doing tunes by Santana. So then I changed the name of the band to Ascension. That's how
Okay.
I got the name Ascension. And the reason I changed it to Ascension, people think it's because of Ascension by John Coltrane. No. Malo, which was a Latin rock band, Carlos Santana's brother, Jorge, was also a great guitarist, may rest in peace, and I got to play with him later on. The last album they did as a band was called Ascension. And I saw the name and I said, wow, what a hip name, man. And plus, if we use Orquesta Suprema, everybody just thinks we're a salsa band, but we weren't just playing salsa. We were playing Song for My Father as a cha-cha, basic jazz tunes. We had very limited knowledge, but we had enthusiasm and we had talent. So the second person in my life that became very important musically, there's three people. So my father, you learned about. Then the second person was Mr. William Ryan, our high school band director. He directed the choir, the band, the concert band, and the marching band. And out of all the students that were in the band, we were the only ones that were super interested in music, and we were already doing gigs. He's the one that helped me get my first set of timbales. So anyway, I was amazed by Mr. Ryan because obviously it's commonplace. If you see a music teacher at any high school, grammar school, they were music ed majors and they learned the basics of every instrument, trumpet, violin, whatever. But I had never seen anybody proficient on such a multiple group of instruments. And then he said, Sanabria, I know you could come after class and practice if you want, you know.
Nice.
So anyway, one day I come in after class and David is there, and he's got a book, a catalog, and it says Berklee College of Music at it on it. And he's looking through it. Hey, Dave, what's that? And he goes, hey, man, this is the school that Quincy Jones went to, man. Chick Corea went to, this, that, and the other. And I go, really? He goes, yeah, man. He goes, I want to go here. And I go, let me see it, you know? And there's a picture, a black and white photo of a rehearsal in one of the rehearsal rooms. And there's a conga player, but you don't see his head. I mean, so you see the back of his head. Later on, I found out years later that was Don Elias.
Ah,
The picture,
nice.
yeah.
Wow.
So
Nice. Nice.
so anyway, our goal was to get into the Berklee College of Music. Now, at that time, you had to audition and you had to take a test, a theory test. I don't know how it is now, but Mr. Ryan found out, and he starts laughing. He goes, "You guys, you'll never make it." He goes, "You know what a harmonic minor scale is?" And I'm looking, and he goes, "No." You know, he goes, "You know what a melodic minor scale is?" And I go, "Nah, you know, listen, I'll make a deal with you. If you keep your grades up and everything, I'll give you theory lessons on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday after class for an hour. Because you're never gonna pass the theory test. Never." So he got a program. I still have it somewhere, a book called "The Program Text and Music," and went through the basics of everything: reading, music, all these things that we just talked about, the modes, Ionian, Dorian, except the whole thing. It was amazing what we were learning from him, and I always remember him because he supported us,
Mm.
and we passed. And you know who did my audition? Gary Burton.
Wow. Nice.
And
Nice.
then when I got my first Grammy nomination in 2000, I was competing against him because he had done an album called in honor of Astor Piazzolla or something with
Yeah,
tango.
the tango album, right?
Right. So we're at the Grammys at the hotel. We see each other. We're coming toward each other like this. He goes, "Roberto," He goes, "Oh man." He goes, "Oh, Master Burton." He goes, "How you doing?" "Oh man." Well, all I can say is we made the right choice letting you into the school.
Nice. Yeah.
We,
Well,
we
I
laughed.
mean, Gary Burton had an incredible memory. First time I met him actually was when I went to a percussion camp, and I was just starting university, and he actually showed me how to hold four mallets because I was playing two. I just started to
Right.
learn, and he's funny. I mean, what a great man. And then after I took his class during this camp, I was considering schools and stuff. So I went to Boston, knock on his door, and I hadn't seen him in a few years. Opens his door. He says, "Aldo, how are you?" I was completely floored. He has
He remembered you. Yeah.
he has an incredible memory still.
What an incredible musician.
Wow.
He's just inspirational. Like So anyway, I get to Berklee, and there's the artist and composer in residence is Michael Gibbs,
Wow.
who did the
Nice.
arrangements for the Mahavishnu, John McLaughlin and the Mahavishnu Orchestra. And by that time I had fallen in love with the Mahavishnu Orchestra because I had heard Bitches Brew. I had all these hip, fortuitous things happen in my life. My mother became a teacher's assistant. I remember practicing English with my mother, teaching her. And then, because what happened was somebody told Juanita, why don't you volunteer at the public school? You like to keep busy. My mother was a very independent woman. So she did. And then somebody told her, "Hey, Juanita, you can become a teacher's assistant. You get paid." I go, "What do I do?" And she goes, "Well, apply here." And she became a teacher's assistant. And she learned how to do
Nice.
lesson plans. And because she's going to me, "What do I do with this?" And I go, "Well, you have to fill out this, ma, and everything." And he goes, and these sheet of paper. And she go, what sheet of paper? And I go, no, ma, you're saying you got to pronounce sheet. I taught her how to say sheet because she used to pronounce it because of her Spanish, you know. And it was hilarious. I go, ma, no, 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 no. If you say that means caca. What? You know, you know. So uh, she was a very religious woman. You know, she'd be those everything. Something good happened. Ay, gloria a Dios. You know, like that kind of glory to God and all that kind of thing. So anyway, she got her English got better, got better. She never lost her accent, but she became very fluent. And this woman that she worked for many years, Mrs. Miller, was a hip, young Jewish woman. I always remember she was gorgeous, beautiful blonde hair. Her husband, Artie Miller, was a great jazz clarinetist. And he invited us to his concerts and gig. And man, that's the first time I ever heard when I was like 13 years old, heard 12, 13, heard somebody play Caravan with a big drum solo in there. And he was a fantastic clarinet player. Anyway, she gave me, you know what she gave me as a birthday present? Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band.
Wow.
She goes, Bobby, I think, you know, this will change your life.
Oh, yeah, it changed a lot of people. It changed a lot of things, actually, that album.
Man, I used to look at the cover just to the people. And I'd ask my father, who's this? You know, like, oh, it's Ho Chi Minh or whatever, you know, this, that, yeah, you know, I knew some people like Fidel Castro and all that, Kennedy, but man, she was so hip. And anyway, what were we talking about? I'm in college, and Michael, I got good. They gave you, I don't know how they do it at Berklee now, but they gave you numbers, 3 numbers for reading, improvisation, and what was the third number? The third number, your technical skills, I think. Those were the 3 numbers. So I got like sevens or something like that, eights or whatever. So I was in some decent ensembles and I was learning and everything. The private teacher I first had, I'm not going to mention their names because I don't want to embarrass them, but they sucked. I remember the first lesson, the guy shows me, okay, you take this grouping of 7 and you can play it over 5. And I'm looking at, he's doing like Frank Zappa stuff, you know, and I'm going, I need to learn how to play the drums, man. Technically, what the hell, you know, how to, you know, I could just play some basic funk rock beats. The thing that helped me was I knew all these Afro-Cuban rhythms, and I knew some basics of Brazilian percussion from listening to the Brazilian music that my father exposed to me, and I taught myself. Nobody knew how to play a Mozambique back then. I remember I was practicing on the drum set. I'd turn around and be like 5 guys watching me. What is that, man? What kind of samba is that? And I go, it's not samba.
Right.
So that was the beginning of my teaching too. And also people would knock on my dorm room door and they say, hey, you got the guy with the Latin records? And in those days, I don't know how it is now, but they let you decorate your dorm room door with posters, cut out. I used to cut out things. I used to cut out like pictures of Buddy Rich, Billy Cobham, post them on the door. My roommate was a trumpet player. He put Doc Severinsen, you know, things. So, and I put Tito Puente there with, you know, picture him and Tibas. People would be knocking on the door. Who's this guy you got here? And what's the instrument? What's that instrument? You know, and I go, well, those are the called the timbales. You ever heard Santana? He goes, yeah, yeah. You know, like, because when you hear Oye Como Va, you know, like the cowbell and all that. So that was the beginning of my teaching. Just trying in my own primitive way, explaining things to people. And also, unfortunately, I found out that nobody knew jack shit about what was going on in New York. First of all, I was the only New York Puerto Rican there. Nobody was there. Nobody. I looked. It was me and 4 Brazilian people.
Wow. Yeah.
That was it. Nobody knew anything. The closest thing they knew about Latin music was Santana and a little Airto, you know, etc. But I remember my first roommate is looking at my records and he goes, what is this? Típica 73. What is it? Típica 73 is one of the most famous salsa groups in New York. They were interesting because they were a combination of a conjunto, Cuban style conjunto with trumpets, but they also had a charanga element, the violin and the flute. So I put the record on, and the guy hears the violin, and he goes, "What is a violin in Latin music?" I mean, again, me explaining in my own primitive way as much as I could what was going on.
Yeah.
And I'm like saying things like, "You don't know what charanga is?" Like I thought everybody knew. So I realized that nobody knew anything about our culture. Nobody knew really what was happening in New York. And a lot of people, unfortunately, were very racist.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
you
the
know,
interesting thing, Bobby, is I remember in the '70s because I was studying. I was a rock drummer and got interested in jazz and everything else, but it was all just a big mountain. So I said I got accepted to McGill, so I was doing my classical, still playing drums and doubling as a jazz also in there. But for anything else, I would fly every month to New York in the
hmm.
'70s
And
and
this was when
study.
you had the family in Melrose Avenue and like,
No, that was way before.
okay,
Yeah, that was way before. But by the '70s, I had a lot of family still in New York, but they're in New Jersey and Long Island and
right, right,
some Brooklyn and some Queens. But I would go every month to study with somebody, so whether it was drum set, percussion. Frankie Malabé was one of my teachers.
right, right,
And because there was nobody really here in most places that knew anything about any Cuban, Brazilian. I mean, Cuban for sure. Nobody had it, not the foggiest. They just didn't know. So I was down there seeking all the jazz drummers, trying to learn from them. I was taking lessons with Bernard Purdy. I was taking lessons with like everybody I can get my hands on. I went to the Collective in the beginning. Remember when they're
right. Did you go to Frank Ippolito's drum shop?
of
Like,
course, I bought my first congas from Frank Ippolito,
right,
and Frank Ippolito. I mean, he was amazing. I also got my Camco pedals with the spokes with the chain drives, right?
right, right,
The
right, right,
original ones. So I still
right.
have two of them actually.
Great, yeah, the collector's items, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's
And
like I don't, with the whole, I'm a New Yorker, so I'm a pragmatist. I just look at it. What do you mean? The chain makes it faster? What is it? Guys. So like, what's the difference between the strap? It's still holding the damn. But
sure,
guys,
sure.
well, suppose it makes it smoother or whatever. I don't know, man. I see Buddy Rich playing with that strap. He plays pretty fast to me,
Oh,
man.
for sure, for sure.
So like, but God, I remember. Oh,
But
you're
Frank
talking about things.
Ippolito, I mean, he was a major force over there. And of course, I met Mel Lewis,
Right,
talking about cymbals. He was in the shop all the time. So as a young kid, I was meeting all of these people. I met Steve Gadd, who used to actually invite me to all his recording sessions by the end
that's
of the
great, man.
'70s. So I
Is it
was
true
like,
that he used to? Is it true that he used to bring like 2 bags of cymbals or something like that? Like,
oh, yeah.
so,
Well, things were delivered to him. I mean, he was driving around in a small Honda Civic
right,
back
right,
in the day, and he would go between sessions, and he would say, "Oh, we're at whatever studio we were at." He says, "Okay, before the next session, I need to go buy an album." So we go to a record shop, and he'd buy something with Tony on it.
right, right.
It was an interesting time for me because I was just learning and from all of these people. And then Frank Malabé, after the lessons, he would take me down in Times Square. Do you remember that record shop that used to
Yeah, the
be?
record bar. Harry Sepulveda was the guy that ran it, and
Yes.
Jesse, the owner was Jesse Moskowitz. I always remember that. Yeah, they were great. They're great. Well, Jesse's no longer alive, but Harry's still alive, and
Nice.
he's retired. Yeah, but that was the great shop because you could buy the authentic Cuban music, all the great New York-based salsa bands, and they also have Jamaican
Yep.
recordings, Haitian recordings that you couldn't find, and of course jazz as well, and pop
Yep. Yep.
and stuff. And Harry, if he had time, he'd talk to you, and we became friends. And I mean, no, New York at that time, forget about it, man. But getting back to Berklee, the so I'm at Berklee. I have a set of timbales, the drum set, and then I played congas because I played in the streets and everything. So I tell my mother, I got to get a conga. So I got one conga. I saved, and she sent me some money. I got one conga, a red drum, similar to what the color you're leaning on. LP. I got an LP. I got the quinto. Then I got the gong. No, I'm sorry. I got the middle drum, the conga, which is the main. If you get one drum, get a conga, the middle drum. So then I got the tumbadora, and then I got the quinto, and then so now I had this, and then I got a set of bongos. So Michael Gibbs is the composer in residence at the school and artist in residence, and he had seen Weather Report, and he saw Manolo Padrena
Padrena.
and Alex
Yeah, yeah,
Acuna.
yeah.
So he was enthralled by that. So he wanted a hand percussionist in his. The best student ensemble at the school was the Michael Gibbs Chrome Waterfall Orchestra. It was made up of teachers and the A-list students. So meanwhile, I'm studying with this one guy. I switched. I said, "Give me another teacher." I studied with another guy. He just sucked. He wasn't giving me what I needed. So finally, in the lunchroom, we're sitting around. The drummers are sitting. Hey man, you need to study with Keith Copeland.
Wow.
He's not.
Yeah.
He's from New York, like you, and he's African American. I think it was Charles Tellerant, who's a friend of mine, great drummer from the San Francisco Bay Area, lives in New York. I think he was the one that said it. So yeah, yeah, man, he'll get your shit together, man. Like he was Alan Dawson's best student because I had. Oh, that's another thing. When I was in high school, David Carmona told me about Berklee, and they had these things in the back you could write for these books. So they had two books: A Manual for the Modern Drummer by Alan Dawson, who I didn't know who he was, and another book called Multi-Pitch Rhythm Studies by Ron Delp. Fantastic book if you could still get it. I don't know if it's available, but it's like it starts up with two pitches, then three pitches, then four pitches. Okay, and you practice on the drum set like that, like a timpani. You can apply it to anything. Great book. So from Alan Dawson's book, if you get that book, another rarity, Manual for the Modern Drum, he had little bios, Big Sid Catlett, Papa Joe Jones, Max Roach, and little transcriptions, 4-bar transcription of licks by them, and little history. And I go, wow, this is, man, fantastic. I got to meet this guy, and this, that, and the other. So anyway, he left the school. When I was a friend, he had left because he had a fight with the school. He was the head of the percussion department. They said, we want somebody that has a degree. He didn't have any degree. Meanwhile, he wrote the complete pedagogy that everybody uses today to teach basic jazz coordination on the drum set. So he got mad. He quit. He wanted a raise and everything. They don't want to give it to him. So he quit. He wound up making more money because people would go to where he lived in the suburbs. I think he lived in Roxbury. But anyway, the person that took his place was Keith Copeland. Gary Chafee came in as the head of the percussion department because he had the credentials. He had a master's degree, etc. But he didn't know anything about clave and Latin music or anything. He comes up to me one day and goes, hey, man, I heard that bring me some records. Bring me some records. So I got him some Tito Puente. I got him some Latin Boogaloo, which is a whole nother style of music, Cuban music, like Son Montuno, Guajira, played with a backbeat, with English lyrics. It was totally New Yorican. And Eddie Palmieri, Charlie Palmieri. I lent them to them. And then when I came back a week later, he goes, hey, these are really cool, man. And I started explaining to him in my own primitive way what was going on. This is charanga, okay, this, that. But I was astounded that, again, nobody knew what this music was about, the major player. How could you not know who the freak Tito Puente is, man?
Yes.
You
Well,
I mean, anyway,
in the academic circles, it was difficult. Yeah.
Anyway, it opened my eyes to show to how closed minded culturally people were outside of New York City. And so I talk about the racism every week. I used to get a phone call. In my dorm room, there was a payphone down the hall. Nobody had cell phones and those. The phone would ring, somebody would walk by or pick it up, and they'd knock on the person's door. Hey, whatever, Charlie, there's a phone call. Somebody knock. Sanabria, it's for you. I will go to the phone, and all of a sudden I hear, "Is this Bobby Sanabria?" I go, "Yeah. How you doing?" He goes, "Go back to New York, you just like that." Click, and I get that once a week in my freshman year. It became a joke, you know. David would ask, "Who is that?" He goes, "Oh, my biggest fan, man." You know, whatever. After a while, but it was disheartening.
Wow.
It was disheartening. It was
That's
disheartening.
weird.
Boston was an ugly, racist town back then. When I remember going to a restaurant, they wouldn't serve me because they heard me talking Spanish. I was in a diner, they wouldn't serve me.
Wow.
And I go, we don't serve, Portuguese here or whatever, because there's a lot of Portuguese people in Boston. I said, I'm not Portuguese, I'm Puerto Rican. And they go, that's even worse.
Wow.
And I go, let me see the manager. So the manager comes out, who's like the guy cooking the food in the back. I go, listen, man, my money is just as good as anybody else. What do you want? I go, I just want a hamburger and a Coke. That's it. And, of course, he got it. And then I checked it to make sure that he didn't spit on it or, anything. I mean, those are the kind of experiences I had in Boston at the time. But anyway, so I go to the office and I says, listen, I want to switch teachers to Keith Copeland. Oh, he's got a waiting list like for 2 years. No, if I don't get to study with him, I'm going to commit. Like, wait a minute. The woman was like, wait, are you serious? Like, hey, like, listen. He goes, no, you don't got to understand, man. These 2 teachers I've had, they suck, and he's the guy that told me that he was, okay, relax. Listen, we'll put in the request, but the best thing is find him and talk to him personally. So I'm looking for him around, all day, Finally, I didn't even know what he looked like, but, they described him to me. I go, he's a light-skinned African-American gentleman, tall. So I see this guy walking down Mass Ave, and I go, are you Mr. Copeland? He goes, yeah. My name is Roberto Sanabria. I got to study with you. Hey, hold on, man. I know who you are, man. Like this. He goes, listen, let me see what I can do. The next morning, I get a little in the mailbox. I get a little note. I'm trying to remember the number of my mailbox. I think it was 1655. Anyway, I get the note. You are now a student of Keith Copeland. Your lessons are whatever. So wow, man. So I go to my lesson, and he has a new Sonar blonde drum set and Sabian cymbals. Now, Sabian, people didn't even know they existed at the time. He had a poster of Harvey Mason and Phil Collins, who were the first 2 Sabian endorsers. And I go, wow. He goes, what's this? He goes, what's this? This is the shit, man. just like that. Because he's from New York, like me. So he goes, all right, Roberto, why don't you sit down and play for me? So I played, some, what now people would consider hip hop beats, and I embellished them and things, So he goes, okay, cool. He goes, we got a lot of work to do, but there's something there. But before I did that, this is what happened. He sat high.
I remember, because I took lessons from him too, by the way.
Yeah.
He's
So
great.
in those days, there were no 2 drum sets, and you played, So I started going like this, turning the seat. He goes, hey, do it, man. What the F are you doing? I go, what do you mean, what the F am I doing, man? The seat is too freaking high, man. I can't. He goes, listen, man. He goes, how would you like it if I went to where you lived and started moving the furniture around in the living room because I didn't like the way it was. And I go, when you sit it on somebody's drum set, you don't move jack shit, you know? You sit down and you freaking play. Now shut the F up, sit down and play for me. That's how the lesson started. And then in my head, I'm going, thank God I finally got the right teacher. You know? I always remember that. I always remember that because he was a New Yorker, just like me. Then I found out that he grew up with Billy Cobham and Lenny White. You know, they knew each other, all of them, you know, they all knew each other, this, that, and the other. Um, you know, it was just great. And he taught me, he goes, okay, here's how you phrase the ride cymbal for swing. That was the first. And then take this, you got to get this book, Syncopation, and go to page 37. You're going to do this. You're going to play 4 on the floor, boom, but don't pound it out, just tap. It, 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 it was what we call feathering, you know, and then the hi-hat, you know, like 2 and 4, obviously. And I never knew that. I never knew that you feathered the bass drum or anything like that because you don't hear it on
Right.
jazz recordings. So then he goes, "Oh, play the figures against the ride cymbal." You know, what's the first figures in syncopation in 37? Dun, dun, da, 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 you know, so then he goes, okay, now you're going to get this book, 150 Rudimental Drum Solos by Charlie Wilcoxon. I go, and he starts telling me, Philly Joe Jones used to practice this book, this, that, and the other. So he shows me the first solo and everything. And I go, wow, you know, and so I didn't know it at the time. But then when we came back, he goes to me, you know what? You see the first solo? If you play this and I play the second solo, it's a duet. If you play number 1 and I play number 4, it's a duet. If you play number 2, number 3, it's a duet. So all of them it was genius what he did, Charlie Wilcoxon. So you could practice with a friend of yours at the dorm or whatever. So anyway, that's the third guy that changed my life in my journey.
He's a great teacher. Great teacher.
He made me the drummer that I am, that I can play in any situation. He showed me how to play in odd meters, the whole thing. And then he started recommending me for gigs. And then, check this out. He used to do these performances in high school, like these masterclass drum clinics. So he gets me. Oh, and he knew who Eddie Palmieri was. He knew who Tito Puente was. I go, oh my God. I told him, you're the only guy that, man, nobody knows jack about what the real deal here is. His father, Ray Copeland, used to play lead trumpet for Tito Puente in the 1950s.
Wow.
He's on all those recordings with Doc Severinsen and all those. Yeah. So I got to meet his wife. I got to meet his son. I got to meet his father, Ray, who had retired. And he takes me and Terry Lynn Carrington, who's like 13, 14 years old, and we go with him to do these clinics. That's how I learned how to do a clinic, from doing clinics with him. Beautiful. I played congas, he played drums. Then he played congas too. I didn't know he played congas. He played congas. He was pretty good. And I played timbales. He'd ask me questions about clave, and I was very, like I'm young. And I goes, he goes, tell me. He goes, he lights up a J, we're in his place in Roxbury. He had this big Doberman picture. He lights up a, you want something? He goes, no, I'm cool. He goes, how do you know what clave it is? And I go, well, all I could tell you is the melody, the melody tells you what the clave direction is, And then I refined that later on by explaining it's the rhythmic content of the melody that tells you what the clave direction is. And he's going, oh, cool, man. And we listen to recordings. Check out Philly Joe, what he does here, this, that, and the other. And he started recommending me to gigs. I remember one gig, it was in Roxbury, which is the black section of town. And I show up with that cheap Ludwig standard drum set that I had. And hi, I'm here. Mr. Copeland recommended me. Oh, okay. He goes, "What's your name?" I go, "Bobby, Roberto Sanabria," but everybody calls me Bobby. He goes, "You Italian?" And I go, "No, no, I'm Puerto Rican." "Oh, okay, cool." They come in, and everybody's black in the band. African American, but the correct term. So the leader turns around me as a tenor player. I always remember this. "Okay, young man, we're playing for dancers. So no bebop, just four on the floor. You could dribble a little bit with your left hand. But remember, we're playing for dancers." And what they did, we're playing High, High the Moon, but for dancers, swing dancers. And stuff. So you can't
Right, right.
be dropping bombs. He goes, "Don't drop no bombs. This is not Vietnam." You know. so he goes, "The war is over." Like, oh man, I loved it. It was
Yeah.
amazing. And then
Let's
he had,
fast.
yeah, go
I was
ahead, go
just
ahead.
gonna I was just gonna say about, because we could be here for a week. So many great stories. But your albums. You did a number of albums. One in particular that. Well, there were a couple that got nominations for Grammys, but the West Side Story, reimagined, I think, was
Oh
an
yeah, yeah, yeah.
interesting one.
That's the kill. I mean, that's like the greatest thing I've done in terms of my work. It's a fantastic album. Everybody should get it. It's a reimagining of West Side Story from my perspective as a New Yorican jazz musician. Um, and what we did was we reworked the entire score of Leonard Bernstein, Maestro Leonard Bernstein, and utilizing Venezuelan, Dominican, Haitian, Puerto Rican, Cuban rhythms, straight ahead jazz, some funk. I mean, everything that represents what the Bronx is and New York is in there. And the identity marker is right away. You could tell it's a different West Side Story because you hear the tritone in the beginning, with the whistle, ba ba ba, you know, and right after that, you hear that.
Right.
Right now, right away, it's a different West Side Story. So what I did was I looked at it from my perspective. It's the present day, and all of the whites that moved out and left the neighborhoods, particularly in Manhattan and the Bronx and Brooklyn, to blacks and Latinos. They want those neighborhoods back. The sons and daughters of those who left, they want those neighborhood. They want to come back to those neighborhoods and take them over again. The gentrifiers. So it's that those people, they're coming into the neighborhood, and obviously they see this rainbow, this kaleidoscope of multiculturalism happening, this multiverse, and that's what the album represents. But let me tell you one quick Berklee story right away. So
Yeah.
I got the congas, bongo, and timbales. I got some Brazilian shakers and a triangle, everything. I will go. So Michael Gibbs, after he saw Weather Report, he wants a hand percussionist in the band. So Tony Tedesco, who was studying, he was already a senior, great jazz drummer, and he became a teacher at Berklee. And I took lessons with him in my senior year. He, a great vibes player too. He went to see Mike. They told me, go see Michael Gibbs. He's in so I went to see him, and Tony was there, and he's talking to him. And Tony goes, "Well," and Michael Gibbs goes, "Well, you both sound like fantastic musicians." He goes, "But I want somebody to play hand drums. Like I saw Weather Report." He said, like what those guys are doing. And he goes to Tony, "Do you play those instruments?" And he goes, "Nah, I'm a good timpanist and jazz drummer." He goes, "Do you play those?" I go, "Yeah, and I have the instruments too." He goes, "Great, you're in you're in the group." So I go to the first rehearsal. It was in E1, which it was the biggest room at the school at the time, biggest ensemble room. And I walk in, and it's like the Don Ellis Orchestra. That setup. Hank Roberts was playing cello, electric cello. Kermit Driscoll was the bass player, and there was Jun Saito was the drummer, and I was playing. My role was to be the hand percussionist. So Michael Gibbs comes over to me, "Roberto, so this is just a piece of paper, 7, 9, 5, like 4." He goes, like a sequence like that. He goes, "You think you could come up with a rhythm for that?" Sure. And me with my arrogant stuff, sure, I can count. And those guys start laughing, and so uh so we started, and then man, all of us, people started coming to see those rehearsals because he was the artist in residence, and everybody knew me at the school from that first rehearsal. They like forget it. I was the guy, like the thing. But there was a guy playing guitar, like a hollow body type of guitar, like George Benson would use, Gibson, and big hair and a lumberjack shirt. So he didn't say hello to me, or he just nodded his head. I try to be friendly. So then the next week comes, he's not there. There's another guy there. His name is Bill Frisell. So then the third week happens, and then finally I talked to Kermit, the bass player. I said, "Hey, whatever happened to that guy that was at the first rehearsal? He was in that. I like the way he played. Man, he was really good." He goes, "That guy? That was Pat Metheny, man. He's on a world tour. He got signed to ECM." So he was teaching at the school at the time. That's how my I'm a kid from the projects, and I was very hip. I knew who Don Ellis was, but I didn't know who Pat Metheny was at the time, even though I had heard about him, but I never had seen a picture of him or anything. So that was my first year at Berklee, and the rest is history. And then little by little, I reformed my group Ascension in Boston, and it became very well known, et cetera, et cetera. But you're talking about West Side Story. Thank you for mentioning that. And if you get the album, the money goes to the Jazz Foundation of America to help my fellow brethren in Puerto Rico who are still suffering from the after effects of all those hurricanes, all the musicians there. So,
Oh yeah, that was a big one, and we could, like as I said earlier, we can go on for days, and maybe eventually we should do another follow up to this because we
yeah,
could spend days, and I know you can talk and you have stories, and we have a lot to say.
I'd like
But
to interview. I'd like to interview you, man. Shit. I mean,
yeah,
you have a fascinating story. But anyway, talking about the classical and jazz degree that I got when I was in Berklee, I was ignorant. They said they had like these programs, certificate program, and I said, well, you don't have to do much to get this. So I'm talking again in the lunchroom, and we're talking about what people are studying, and this he goes, yeah, he goes, I'm in the certificate program, and he goes, so when I get my degree, he goes, and somebody goes, you don't get no degree if you get a certificate program. I go, what do you mean? Because you just get a certificate. I go, what? I go, you study for 4 years, all you get is a certificate? Yeah, man. To get a degree, you got to be in applied music, but you got to be crazy, man, because you got to take 8 semesters of classical percussion and 8 semesters of jazz drumming. What? So right away, I went to that was my first semester. I had already done my first semester. I had a missed art already. And I go to the office and I go, listen, I got to change my major to applied music. He goes, you sure you want to do that? You've already missed half. You got to play catch up. He goes, you got to take courses like philosophy and history of art. And I go, I don't care. That's So
yes.
little did I know. Oh my God, man! Like most of these gray hairs and the bags and all that still come from that time period. But it was a great thing because I was the first person in my family to go to college and graduated. My mother and father were crying, at the graduation ceremony and the whole thing. And plus, I stayed. But listen, my freshman year, I got offered the gig to play percussion with Al Di Meola,
Nice.
and I turned it down. So, because I said, Rafael Cruz uh, called me and he says, "You want the gig, man? Starts next week." And I go, "Listen, man, I want to finish school because if I go to play with Al, I'll never come back to school. I'll never finish. And I want to be a good arranger, composer, full musician, and a good jazz drummer." He goes, "Are you crazy?" I go, "No, no. I just." Anyway, I knew Raphael, and I had a big laugh with him years later about that conversation. But things like that were happening my freshman year. I was getting offers and things, and I would just turn them down, because I knew what I wanted to do. And it was this also happened my freshman year. Tito Puente came to he was playing at the Harbor House in the suburb of Boston. I had to take a bus, train, I forget it. I go there. I tried to get some of my fellow college brethren to go, sisterin too, to go with me. And they didn't want to go. So I went by myself. And I go there, and Tito's playing, and people are dancing mambo, the older crowd. And I go, wow, good mambo dancers up here in Boston. So finally, I get the balls to go up to him. And I go, Maestro Puente. He goes, yeah. I go, can I sit in? He goes, sure. What do you play? And I go, timbales. And he goes, timbales? And he goes, guess what, guys? Guess what this kid plays? Timbales. And they all go at the same time. Wow, timbales. They're like clowning me, like something serious. So he goes, all right, come on up. So he calls off a G minor to C7 descarga, and we start trading. He goes like this. He goes, you know what this means? I go, yeah, I know, Force. You know, we're playing. And he had the timbales and the timbalitos. So, you know, we were able to trade off each other. And the crowd went crazy. And he, ever since then, he was my friend, biggest supporter. What are you doing here? And he goes, you don't sound like you're from Boston. I go, I'm Puerto Rican like you, from New York, and I'm studying at Berklee. Oh, I went to Juilliard, and the whole thing. So that was great. Jose Maso, the great legendary DJ in Boston, was there, and he comes up to me. Oh my God! Wow, this, that, and the other. He drove me back to my dorm, and we've been friends ever since. A big supporter, and Tito was always a big supporter. In my first album, New York City at Che, I asked him if he would play with me. He goes, sure. What do you want me to play? I go, just let's do a duet. Me on drum set, you on timbales, and we did it. It's called Two Generations. You can hear it
nice
on YouTube if you want, if you don't want to spend the money to get the CD. But anyway, that was my freshman year at Berklee, it hasn't stopped since then. So I'm very fortunate, and we could talk about other stuff, the rest of it on another occasion.
I
hope I didn't bore you or anybody that's out there watching and listening.
No, a lot of interesting stories, and it's what's important at the end of the day, as we're designing our lives, as we're walking that road, as we're shaping our journey, more or less. I mean, you have to make those decisions. I mean, like turning down things. I mean, I had the same kind of thing because I was an immigrant, and my father said, after all of this, please get a degree, please study, because that's what's gonna. So I had an obligation. So I had auditions that I never did because I was offered the auditions to do some major. I won't mention names, but they're pretty big in the world. And
I bet you got off at I'm sure you got off at Gino Vanelli, probably, something like that.
That was one. That was one.
And that was the great thing about Berklee too. I didn't know who the freak Gino Vanelli was, but through
he's amazing.
My roommates and things like that, I said, you're not hip to Gino Vanelli. Check him out, and I go, wow, man, what a cool artist. This, that, and the other. And is he still performing? I'm sure he's still performing.
Oh yes. He's gone through a lot of transformations. Every once in a while he comes back on doing something different. He's in a different light. But he was one of those guys. Let me finish this.
Yeah, go ahead.
He was one of those guys that was so original in his orchestration. I mean, there was a drummer, two percussionists, a keyboard player. Two keyboard players. His brother played piano, electric piano, and the other guy played organ, but the bass was, he was playing the bass. So it was all percussion practically. And these orchestrations of the band was just amazing.
Yeah. But, I had never heard of him until I went to Berklee, it was great. And I learned a lot of other things. But of course, anybody that came in contact with me, they were like fascinated by all the stuff that was happening in New York City. And I told Kermit, I remember, I'm going to be moving to New York, man. I go, well, you better learn how to play salsa, man. He goes, nah, well, hey, dig what you do, Roberto. And then one day I saw him in the street. In New York, he goes, man, you were right. I go, because if you play in New York City, you're gonna have to encounter the world that I come from, and whether you like it or not. And now that world has expanded because it's Dominican music, I played so many cumbia gigs, which is the rocksteady rhythm of Colombia, in New York City because the Colombian and Ecuadorian community became big, and Peruvian community in New York City. So you got to play their music.
Sure.
So Greek music, I've played Greek music, Kalamatiano, Hasapo, all that stuff. Now you're looking at me and somebody's going, what a freaking Rican playing all that. Why not? It's just like, it's just like Don Ellis playing Bulgarian music. So,
Yeah.
but I have to, I've been mentioning my father a lot. I must say my mother was very important in my life. You know why? And maybe some of you watching this will relate to it. When I told to go to college outside of New York City to Berkeley, you had to get your papers signed by your parents giving you permission to leave the state because you're a minor.
Right.
I go to my mother, and she knew that this was my dream to go to college, to go to Berkeley. And she signed right away. And my father had to sign. And my father's looking at me. I didn't think you were that serious, and this, that, and the other. You should think about this. You could stay here in New York. You can still do gigs. And I go, Pop. And this is all in Spanish. There's no place like Berkeley here in New York City. There just isn't. And I need to leave the South Bronx. I need to leave. I can't stay here. I grew up here and everything. It's that, I want to see what the world holds, and kept telling, things like, I want to meet people from different places. And he's going, people from different places. Yeah, I go, I know, but they're all New Yorkers. Or I go, I want to meet, I don't know anybody from Texas or anything. So I was looking at him, and I'm going to say it in Spanish, the way she said it. She goes, my mother used to call him Joe. His name was Jose. Pues mira, Joe, te lo juro por mi madre que está enterrada en Puerto Rico, en Yabucoa. Si tú no firmas los papeles para tu hijo ir al colegio y sobrevivir sus sueños, te voy a divorciar. Listen, Joe, I swear by my mother who's buried in Yabucoa,
Wow.
if you don't sign the papers for your son to go to college and fulfill his dream, his destiny, I would divorce you. And she was serious.
Sure.
And he looks at her and he looks at me for like about 5 seconds, the silence. Maybe it was 10 seconds. Who the hell knows? All I know there was silence. And nothing happened. And all of a sudden, he goes, Dame los papeles. Give me the papers. And he signed. So if it
Amazing.
wasn't for my mother, who knows? You probably wouldn't. We wouldn't be talking right now, But I
Yeah.
always remember that my mother did that for me. My father, obviously, he loved me. He concerned. He said all the things that all parents say. Well, you're gonna, you could get a job here and have something to fall back on. You don't make that much money in music, this, that, and the other. Look at the places you got to play at, bars, restaurants, this, that, all that stuff. And he everything he said was true. That was the funny thing. Everything that he said was true. But I suggest to anybody watching out there who's a young student or young person, be steadfast in your desire for and your passion for what you want to do. Somehow, I can't guarantee anything for you, but you will if you don't follow that path that you see yourself going, you'll always regret it, and that's the worst thing. That's the worst thing, I think, because I've met many people
Yep.
in my life who, man, I remember I used to play football or whatever. My dream was to play in the NFL, and then I got this day, or whatever, in many different walks of life, and they just give it up, and it's devastating. It's
Sure.
devastating. So,
And yeah, and it's all about shaping your journey, but it doesn't come on a silver platter. I mean, you work for it, but with a design, with
yeah,
a mission. You stay on your mission, right? And and be true to it.
And of course, you need some people like an Alegua to open up the doors for you. You know,
Of
as
course.
they would say say in Cuba. Alegua is the guardian of the crossroads. He's the avatar of Ache, and he's the excuse me. Let me just decline that. He's the avatar of Ache in the Yoruba religion known as Ifa in Nigeria, with the Yoruba people, and Santeria in Cuba. He's everything begins and ends with him. You know, you have to. So everybody needs an Alegua to open the doors for you.
Sure.
So, and the main thing is that once they open the door for you, like my mother did, go through it.
You
Listen,
got it.
when I was at Berklee my freshman year, I met guys that had been studying drums since they were like 6 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old. They could read fly crap, you know, fly shit. They knew the Wilcoxon book already, backwards and forwards. They knew how to play polyrhythms and everything. But the one thing that they didn't know was this. And I knew that. And that evened out the playing field because,
Yeah.
you know, like I told you, man, I'm playing the Mozambique thing on the drum set. There's like 5, 10 guys outside going, yo, man, what is. I always
Yes.
remember the first guy said, what kind of samba is that? Oh, and then another guy's, yeah, man, I dig your samba. I go, I was like, it's not samba. It's, you know, like this, that, and the other. So, you know.
Anyway, I mean, it's all important in understanding that at the end of the day, you're driving your bus, and you gotta keep it on that road, you know, and shaping your journey. But I want to thank you, Bobby, for taking the time to join me in this conversation. Of course, we can go on for days. We may have to continue another time, but thank you
Yeah,
for doing
thank
this.
you. I just want to say also, again, thank you so much for the opportunity. Also, if you're studying out there, make sure if you go to college and you're studying percussion and drums for 4 years, if you don't know by the end of those 4 years how to write a big band chart, at least a basic big band chart, then you wasted your time because you're there not only to start mastering the instruments that we all play, but to become a well-rounded, complete musician. And that means becoming a composer and arranger. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I want. That's why I went to Berklee for too. And it's proven very fruitful for me with directing my own big band. So make sure those of you who are young to do that, because you could study privately with anyone or a bunch of different and get that same knowledge. What you go to college for is to become a complete musician, un músico completo. That means becoming a great drummer, percussionist, and also a great composer and arranger as well. And that will help you just become an educator as well. And it'll give you more opportunities as well in terms of your work. If you're not playing, you're writing. You know, somebody could. I've gotten calls. Hey, Bobby, I need a 3-horn chart by when? Tomorrow. I go, all right. So what's the tune? You know, and all of a sudden I've made $200. You know, I mean, so also those of you who are watching, my radio show is from 4 to 6 Eastern time every Saturday on the #1 jazz station in the nation, WBGO, the Latin Jazz Crew. So I'll see you on the radio. And if you miss the episode, like tomorrow, Saturday's episode, you can go to the archives. And to access the archives, you simply type WBGO Latin Jazz Cruise, CRUISE. Also have a new album coming out with my multiverse big band, my multi-Grammy nominated multiverse big band this spring, called Vox Humana. We recorded it live at Dizzy's, just like we recorded West Side Story Reimagined. And it features 3 of the most incredible contemporary jazz singers: Janice Siegel from the Manhattan Transfer, from the Ellington Orchestra, Antoinette Montague, and a fellow Bronxite who's half Puerto Rican, half Dominican, Jennifer J. Ledesma, who sings in French, Spanish, Brazilian Portuguese, and English. She's a powerhouse. I've always wanted to do this. I finally found the right 3 singers. It's a completely vocal album, but with plenty of solos and great orchestrations and everything. And it's very, the album is also very autobiographical. All these things that I've talked about with Aldo are in this album. So we hope you get it. It's called Vox Humana. It'll be available in the spring.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Bobby. And as I always say, to be continued.